Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from the King of Lightning.
Peace and lust.
This video has been a long time coming. Ever since I did my response video to a video that Brago made over 3 years ago about Mihawk and Big Mom. Ever since then, I've been waiting patiently for Oda to give us more intel on what is the case here when it comes to the strongest swordsman in the world. Lo and behold, in chapter 1058 last year, or recently, episode 1086, we have achieved stability. I would argue peace of mind has been attained because what I said years ago has finally come to pass. And when that chapter dropped last year and the corresponding episode dropped a few weeks ago, I promise you, like it was the end of Kung Fu Hustle. When I looked up the night sky, I promise you, I almost saw Buddha. Woo! And he was smiling. So this video will focus on the facts. Little frills, cancer-free.
Stop the cap.
If that's even possible. With even some charts to help people conceptualize what has been laid bare before us by Eiichiro Oda, or as some folks say, Eiichiro Oda. And of course, well edited by Jafar from afar, and all the timestamps will be down below. In a general sense, you can see this video as an updated version to what I did 3+ years ago about this same subject, and of course now with a lot more important details that desperately needed clarity. But in short, with so many of the top titles that exist in the series, like the World's Strongest Man, or the World's Strongest Creature, or the World's Worst Criminal, rarely do we get the full context of what these things really mean. Like, who is more powerful, the World's Strongest Man or the World's Strongest Creature? The devil's in the details, but Oda doesn't even tell us those details. Until very recently. Oda has finally and effectively told us what the title of the World's Strongest Swordsman mean, in both the anime and the manga. The World's Strongest Swordsman is the person with the greatest sword skill, even greater sword skill than red hair Shanks. These are the words that Brand New state while revealing Mihawk's bounty of 3,590,000,000 berry. And in doing so, Oda, through Brand New, validates the idea that Shanks is superior to Mihawk in overall power, because sword skill, kenjutsu, is just one aspect of a person's power in the world of One Piece. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty, honey bunches of oats, PB&J on rye bread, duty calls, and that duty is not what you think, because I have to give a brief word for today's sponsor. And today's sponsor is none other than the Surfshark VPN.
Oh!
You see, the World Wide Web absolutely is a very dangerous place. One false step, one wrong move, and you will find out that your week, your month, your year could be completely ruined. And that's why, for my fellow weebs out there across the world, I know that we explore some very interesting locations and some very interesting places on the web.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to...
But you need protection, you need safety, and Surfshark VPN absolutely has your back with dope features like the clean web feature that clears up any malware, any viruses, any bad actors that may try and ruin your day. I am a big dude.
Duh.
And part of the reason why is because of them sweet, delicious cookies. Absolutely. But I hate them. I detest them online. So Surfshark VPN is my online dietitian as well. And it's my dietitian everywhere. My desktop, my laptop, my phone, wherever I am, I can have Surfshark VPN protecting me, making sure I am secure, safe, and sound. Furthermore, if you want access, let's say any region-gated content, let's say on Netflix, let's say on Hulu, and even my own channel, since I do have region-gated content.
What did he say?
And you want to gain access to this region-gated content, then you can easily do so by changing the location that you are located in with Surfshark VPN, and with the click of a button, that region-locked content has now been unlocked. locked. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, go in the description box down below. You use code KOL, that is KOL, to get a holiday special deal and 6 months free. Once again, use code KOL, and now let's get back into the video.
I mean, a lot of people, they pick up swords and it seems like that's their primary weapon, but is it really the case?
So about 3 years ago, B-Day Law on his channel made a video talking about his perspective of true swordsmen in One Piece. The conversation centered around Mihawk and Big Mom. In that video, he talks about various things like Roger using the Divine Departure on Oden and what that means in respects to being a swordsman. Kaku being a swordsman, but using many unconventional techniques outside of the realm of typical swordsmanship, and various other thoughts along those lines. Within the prism of the world One Piece, according to Brago, he had the idea of true swordsmen. They follow the way of the blade and grow with their blades, unlike the typical swordsman. However, the contention was done for users like Sea of the Rain or Fujitora, where they fall in this gray zone of being regular swordsmen to true swordsmen. So the example that he uses is if Mihawk and Fujitora fought, and Fujitora won the fight by dropping a meteorite on top of Mihawk, does then Fujitora take the title of world's strongest swordsman? This idea, of course, offshoots to Big Mom, since her primary weapon is a sword, but she has homies and other weird things going for her that make her powerful. To the point where back then he said in that video, he can see Big Mom beating Mihawk. Someone like Roger, Brago thought, could be at his best even without a sword in his hand, and in theory, develop various ways of fighting beyond his sword. But someone like Rayleigh, he did not see that applying for him. Now, I don't know if Brago still holds these thoughts, since it has been over 3 years. If I remember, one day I'll try and do a conversation with Brago about this said subject. But after he made that video 3 years ago, I did a response video sticking to the paradigm that he established in his video about swordsmen and true swordsmen. In fact, I went a step further and I made a ladder system of sorts where you have your non-swordsman at the bottom, then you have your swordsman, your true swordsman, and then finally you have your pure swordsman at the very top of that ladder. And in the video, I talk about various unique cases of swordsmen, like Brook and Law, Sea of the Rain, and so on, but the defining difference here for me was not devil fruit power, or even developing different ways of fighting per se. No, to me, the key thing, the quintessential thing, was sword skill. That was my nexus point. And in the latter half of that video, I explained the idea that Shanks is somewhat inferior in sword skill to Mihawk, but has other aspects of his power that are superior than Mihawk's. This is the reason why Mihawk, despite being the world's strongest swordsman, is weaker than someone who has a sword as a primary weapon. This same logic also applied to Goldie Roger and Big Mom and other such characters. And it appears that ultimately, from last year in the manga and this year in the anime, focusing on sword skill as this primary trait, it seems to have paid off big time ever since Mihawk's bounty reveal. What I said has come to pass. Peace at last.
No.
At least I would like to believe. Because obviously, from these reveals, last year now in the anime, spiraling into complete and utter mayhem online, with folks going at each other's throats. And admittedly, even though I would love to be a monk on top of a mountain away from all the chaos, I have gotten the temptation to swing a few pitchforks myself here or there. As of late, got a little bit revved up because folks are going as far as saying that Mihawk is like definitively stronger than Goldie Roger at his peak.
That is blasphemous.
So, yeah, so it does take a will of indomitable steel to see that and not have a retort. So I'm not perfect. Right now, let's lay everything bare on the table and address everything I can in full, moving away from the system that I had in my last video, since I did feel that it was at times confusing, and given this new intel about Mihawk and his bounty and so on, we can actually simplify things and really get down to the brass tacks as I see it. And the first thing I have to tackle here is the big football center with the nickname Sword Skill. Mihawk is the world's greatest swordsman because he has the best sword skill, sword play as they say in the anime. But what is sword skill in One Piece? Oda doesn't really have a clear definition of what it is per se in this world, because there are so many different kinds of swordsmen in the series. In chapter 1023, King the Wildfire states that he does not need to belong to any sort of swordsmanship school or martial arts school after Zoro calls him a killer machine. And then Zoro's response is, well, okay, you never did actually call yourself a swordsman. But King the Wildfire does use a sword, and he does put haki on his sword. So how can Zoro say that about King the Wildfire when King the Wildfire is using a sword?
No idea.
Scratch my head. What's also weird too is that some folks would say that Newgate Whitebeard is a swordsman of sorts, since his Naginata is one of the 12 supreme grade blades, the Murakumo Giri. It's in the same camp as Roger's Ace and Mihawk's Yoru. This logic can also apply to Killer's Punisher sickles being blades, therefore in some way sword skills needed to use them effectively. So you can see how, based on the wide variety again of swordsmen in the world, things can get somewhat tricky. So let's go in the opposite direction first and then make our way to our conclusion. What is not sword skill? Well, sword skill is not marksmanship, it's not tech. It's not necessarily Kenpo, hand-to-hand combat. It's not hypnotism, it's not music, it's not cooking or even dancing. But in the series of One Piece, you can use swordsmanship in conjunction with these things. For example, Niji, Sanji's brother, is able to combine his sword skills with the extreme tech of Germa 66 to make a technique called Light Speed Sword Henry Blazer. Henry Blazer! Cutting and frying at the speed of light. Streusen, as a chef, can cut the top of the entire Whole Cake Island chateau cleanly off in parallel with his swordsmanship and devil fruit abilities. Izo, after imbuing his bullets with haki, he can fire them off in a unique way, making air cuts along with the bullets themselves, and they're called his bullet slicing rounds. Even Nekomamushi, he defeated Sparrow in chapter 1026 with an Oden one sword style technique called Feline Frenzy. He doesn't actually have a sword in his hand, but his quote-unquote sword are what? His claws. The sword skills that Nekomamushi had acquired while training under Oden were on display with his cat claws. So these are, of course, some examples of how swordsmanship can be used in conjunction with other various kinds of abilities and skills in the One Piece world. We're seeing swordsmanship with tech. We're seeing swordsmanship with marksmanship. We're seeing swordsmanship with cooking, thereby affirming the pretty obvious that swordsmanship is not these things. It's not tech, it's not marksmanship, it's not cooking. And among the pool of other abilities and techniques, sword skill is not devil fruits, nor is it haki. Now, the former is pretty obvious, though of course we will touch upon that later, but the real issue that you see with online discourse about the subject is the latter, the haki element. Many folks online believe through and through that swordsmanship and haki are inseparable. They use examples like Zoro tapping into the breadth of all things, Armor Haki in some capacity to be Mr. One, Das Bones, or Mihawk training Zoro to use Armor Haki during the pre-time skip, or Hyogoro's words to Luffy while they were training in the Udon prisoner mines to learn Ryo. Now there is one more key example that folks use to try and align haki with swordsmanship carte blanche. But first, let's tackle the validity of the other three that I mentioned before in reverse order once again. Number 3, Hyogoro in chapter 939 in the Viz translation has a similar line to what we hear Zoro call when he fought against Das Bones. And I quote, "This haki must be a foreign concept. Try it, fellow. In 102, there is a invisible power that stems from the body and can be infused with the blade. A good katana will cut through steel when you want it to, and it will not break a sheet of paper if you do not wish it so. It is all according to the desire of the swordsman." And that is his quote. So while it is true that Hyogoro does put in lockstep the ideas of haki and swordsmanship, he also says that this applies to Wano country. He doesn't make a carte blanche statement for the entire world. Not every country in the world of One Piece train their swordsmen with haki as a focal point for their swordsmanship. An example of this is on the crew. Brook does not know an ounce of haki, but his arrow knot strike was renamed from an attack called the Requiem La Banderole because of how proficient he was at using it. And since that's the case and he has no haki, this kingdom that he's from didn't care or didn't know to incorporate haki in their speed fencing style swordsmanship, unlike seemingly what Wano country has done, at least back in the day before Orochi banned all the dojos in Wano when he took over. The same thing applies for the original army of Dressrosa. They don't infuse or incorporate haki into their sort of training and swordsmanship. You don't see that with the Alabasta military. And in fact, the only other country to do this is Amazon Lily, where haki is a focal point of their training. But in their case, it's not just for swordsmanship, it's for everything carte blanche. It's for arrows, for swordsmanship, for stabs, for glaives, for fist fighting. It's haki for everything. So that's all point number 3. Now, point number 2. In chapter 779, Mihawk in the Zoro flashback teaches him how to use haki. True, but why? We know that haki can strengthen attacks, but the purpose of Mihawk training Zoro armored haki was to prevent damage to his blades. In the Viz translation, he says, and I quote, "Have you ever broken a blade? A few times. You did even to me. If you'd infused them with haki, those swords would not have broken. You must treat every nick as a mark of shame. Every weapon can be turned into a black blade like mine. No liquor until you master this feat." Nani? That is exactly what Mihawk says verbatim. The primary reason why Zoro learned armor haki was to prevent his swords from getting damaged. And Zoro's reaction after beating Pika is literally no nicks or scratches. And he's pleased with that result. Very pleased. If, let's say, we remove Zoro having haki at all during that Pika fight, if Zoro has no haki at all, would he have still beaten Pika?
No.
Yes. But in the process, he may have to exert more physical power since haki does add attack power, A, and B, his swords would have probably gotten some nicks or scratches in the process. So when folks kind of vaguely say things like, well, why did Mihawk train Zoro to use haki over the time skip? When you read it for yourself, it's very, very clear. He did it so he could keep his swords in pristine condition. As far as we know, that was the primary purpose for Zoro learning armor haki, not to master some sort of crazy Final Fantasy over-the-top ultimate attack. No. Now, number one, it is likely true though that Zoro incorporated haki into his Lion Song attack that he used on Das Bones during the Alabasta arc. And it does match up with Hyogoro's words later on in the series. But therein lies the answer to this situation. The connection between Wano country and Zoro's technique. Remember that in chapter 1023, Kawamatsu and Hyogoro talk about Zoro's sword style being the same as Shimotsuki Ushimaru. Where was Zoro raised? He was raised in Shimotsuki village in the East Blue. That was revealed in chapter 440 when it was Frost Moon / Shimotsuki village, and later on again in Zoro's 1033 flashback. Kuina and Koshiro are both Shimotsuki, revealed in SBS 96. And Zoro's grandmother, Furiko, is the sister of Ushimaru, revealed in SBS number 105. All of this is to simply say that what Zoro has been learning for most of his life, even before he set sail with Monkey D. Luffy, that has been Wano country swordsmanship. The very same swordsmanship where they use haki as one of their focal points, making it all the more natural for him to awaken haki usage when he was on the brink of defeat at the hands of Das Bones. The logic there, I'd argue, is sound, undeniably. And now that I've addressed some of those major points, it's becoming all the more clearer that, yeah, haki and swordsmanship are not in lockstep unless it's incorporated by the swordsman specifically for training and to enhance their sword techniques. This is not a universal thing that applies to every swordsman. However, there is another giant that I have to tackle, and it's a colossal blade wielded by the current world's strongest swordsman, Dracula Mihawk. Some people use the logic that because Yori is a black blade, It proves that Mihawk's haki is the strongest, literally superior than any other sword user in the history of the series outside of Ryoma. That would include Goldie Roger, that would include Shanks, potentially Whitebeard, since his blade is also Flame Blade 2, that would include Oden, etc., etc. However, there is a massive assumption on the part of these people.
What do you mean, you people?
And one that goes against the official narrative at the moment. Once again, Mihawk in chapter 779 claims that every weapon can turn into a black blade like Yoru. If you slap some good haki on it, that's all you really need. Zoro mentions in chapter 473 that even if a dinosaur stepped on Shusui, it would not bend. Hardness.
Oh my.
Hardness is a special characteristic of black blade. Haki infused black blades match that aspect and become stronger and more durable. Mihawk again states that Zoro's swords wouldn't have broken when they fought at Baratier in the pre-time skip. However, we know that those swords are utter crap because the man that made them, Kozaburo, said so himself in the chapter 1033 flashback. So black blades are tough, but haki on top of a blade can match, and a permanent black blade, according to Sukiyaki in chapter 955, is a sword that has, quote, risen in rank, end quote. And ultimately, Enma has yet to raise in rank and could one day raise in rank when it becomes a black blade. So in the process of raising its rank, its durability and its quality will overall improve. And maybe some other hidden things to it, but we're not aware of that stuff just yet. But even though Oden and Zoro have Conqueror's haki, they have infused Enma with Conqueror's haki infusion, the blade itself did not become a black blade. And the fact that people that Mihawk himself acknowledges to be a distance from him, someone like Whitebeard, thereby his pirate rival Roger, they could slap on oodles of haki on their famed blades, but their famed blades now become black blades. The answer in some folks' minds is just, okay, well, more haki low. But at the same time, what's far more likely is that you need something beyond haki to turn a sword into a black blade. I did do a video on the subject over here a long time ago, and it still has merit to it at this point in time, so check it out here in this corner. Once again though, a black blade probably requires something else beyond haki for it to exist. What is that something? We don't know. However, this is officially backed up in the Road to Laugh Tale, chapter 1053, volume 2.2. At the end of the data sword grade section, there is a final note saying, and I quote, "Can any sword become a black blade? Many questions still remain unanswered when it comes to black blades like Yoru and Shusui. Is haki alone really enough?" So even though we don't know how a permanent black blade is forged, you cannot say that you need the strongest haki in the verse to make one, since most of the official evidence points to something outside of haki in its creation. So I've tackled what I thought were the most important talking points about this idea that sword skill and haki are in tandem. Fundamentally, I'd argue it never made much sense to begin with, because we knew from the very inception of haki that it was something outside of the paradigm of sword skill. This goes double when you realize there are strong people, world-renowned swordsmen, that have little, if not no haki at all in their sword play. And so let's look at some of these examples right here, right now. And first up, obviously, are folks that lean with their sword play in conjunction with their devil fruit powers, instead of having armor haki or conqueror's haki enhance their sword play. So someone like Hawkins, a supernova, world-renowned, who combines his sword skills, that phenomenally epic deer, I love that deer, and of course, his devil fruit power to make that straw sword. Or let's say someone like Kaku, combining his 4-sword style with his martial arts skill, the 6 powers, and his giraffe devil fruit ability. Then you have Diamante, who is Pika's peer, undefeated in the Cordia Coliseum before the Dressrosa arc, and he is the one that taught Trafalgar Law his sword skills. Uh-oh, guess what? Trafalgar D. Vote l'or. A man who has one of the top bounties in the world of One Piece at 3 billion berry, matching an admiral's cross guild bounty. And of course, speaking of which, an admiral like Fujitora is also one of them too, with great, of course, undeniably great observation haki, but swordplay amplified mainly by what? His Devil Fruit ability. And you can apply the same thing to, let's say, Kizaru or Kuzan, because they can also make swords with their powers, but obviously this goes stronger for someone like Fujitora, who carries around a physical sword all the time. There are even people that don't have any confirmed haki, but they still get the job done as strong swordsmen. We already mentioned before Strusen, the first mate of the Big Mom Pirates and a former Rocks crew pilot member. We see you hiding behind those big exclamation marks in chapter 1096. I see you, Strusen. But then you have, of course, someone like Brook, who is a man worth almost 400 million berry bounty. Once again, Brook has no haki. People who do have haki are worth less than Brook. Guaranteed, Brook is beating many haki users, even though the man himself does not have haki. And let's slide in some old school Skypiea love here, because Nolan, Montblanc Nolan, is also low-key a very powerful swordsman without any haki. Keep in mind that during the entire Skypiea arc, Luffy and company had a hard time with the Lord of the Sky Nola. Zoro and Wiper fought Nola together, and they could not beat Nola, the Lord of the Sky, that giant snake. 400 years ago, there was a god serpent called Kashigami, and Montblanc Nolan decapitated a snake of the same caliber as Nola, the one that Zoro and Wiper together could not beat. He decapitated the snake with a single swing of his blade. Casually, and right now, Montblanc Nolan has no confirmed haki. 0. Then, there is the very curious case of Kiros, the one-legged, legendary, world-renowned gladiator of the Cordia Coliseum in Dressrosa. 3,000 straight W's. Like Zoro, who fought and beat one of Dofi's top commanders, Pika, Kiros did the same thing to Diamante. He beat Diamante's half-moon glaive with his Tureno Bastardo, whatever it is.
I don't know. I don't care.
He beats Diamante with essentially a single attack in chapter 776, even cutting through Diamante's sword in the process, undeniably a devastating blow. And yes, the next chapter, Diamante does fall on Scarlet's grave, but Kiros effectively just one-shots Diamante. And Kiros, right now, as of this video's recording, 0 confirmed haki. Zilch, nada, no haki at all. And he beats someone that is Pika's peer. And guess what? I saved the best for last. It's not even him. The best for last is arguably the upgraded version of Mihawk. Mihawk 2.0, aka S-Hawk. When S-Hawk attacked Blackbeard, Amazon Lily, he also cut the main mountain city of the country. A better swordsmanship feat than Zoro cutting Pika, or even Mihawk himself cutting the frozen tsunami at Marine Ford. S-Hawk displayed that devastating move even through Blackbeard's haki-hardened guard. But S-Hawk himself, 0 confirmed haki at this point in time. S-Hawk even has several clashes with Zoro while his haki is on his blades, Zoro's blades, but there is no haki on S-Hawk's Yoru-based sword. Not a single gram or speck of it. So I think I rolled through this as thoroughly as I could, with plenty of factual examples and official statements as of, again, this video's recording. I could be wrong in the future if that, let's say, changes, but right now, as of video's recording, I'm pretty clean. And given everything I have said so far, it looks like we kind of boiled down sword skill, swordsmanship, essentially like this. It is how proficient someone is at using a blade, indicated by the use of various techniques and skills. And these sword techniques and skills can be utilized in conjunction with other independent abilities, equipment, and skills. And in the series, there is no other better example than this one man, the green-haired Giga Chad himself, Gaimon. Of course, I'm talking about his cousin, his moss-head cousin, Roronoa Zoro. Zoro has a tremendously long list of sword techniques that we have seen throughout the entire series of One Piece, stemming all the way from no sword style, 0 sword style, to 9 sword style Kyutoryu. It's crazy when you think about how many moves Oda has given Zoro throughout the entire series of One Piece. Zoro has very, very strong haki, can use Conqueror's Haki Infusion with weird green embers on his flames, and undoubtedly has insane physique, without a doubt. However, when is Zoro at his best? When is Zoro truly at his best? The answer is simple. When he wields all 3 of his blades. Zoro's haki level does not change if he's using 1 sword or 2 swords or 3 swords, since haki comes from within. Like we read before in chapter 939, Hyogoro literally says as much, where he says, and I quote again, "Strive fellow, in 102 there is an invisible power that stems from the body and can be infused with the blade." So once again, Zoro's haki levels will not change. But if 3 versions of Zoro existed, a 1 sword style version, a 2 sword style version, and a 3 sword style version, the 2 sword style version will always be stronger than the 1 sword style version, and the 3 sword style version will always be stronger than the 2 sword style version. Why, you ask? Because Zoro can only use his best sword techniques when he's wielding all 3 of his blades. The very thing he spent most of his life training for, Santoryu. That's why he told Brook Ryoma that he wished he could have shown him his Santoryu. That's why in chapter 1010, Zoro's best shot was going Kyutoryu 9 sword style from his 3 sword style fighting against Kaido. In fact, Zoro can't even use his Ashura Kyutoryu 9 sword style without all 3 of his swords. And listen, man, I've been around for a while in this game. I really have. I have never heard a good argument against the idea that Zoro with 1 sword or 2 swords is superior than Zoro with 3 swords. I've never heard a good argument against it, because it's basically spitting in Zoro's face and telling Zoro that the sword style he spent most of his life perfecting and honing, the things he told Ryoma and the things he told Kaido, nah, dude, get better hockey, little bro. Lol. I said cancer-free. But his improved Onigiri, his improved Tornado, where it stays around for a long period of time, or his superior Phoenix Pound Cannon, his secret skills like the Crossroad of 6 Paths, or the Great 3000 World, to look at all these superior techniques and say, no. Who cares? Trash, better hockey. No.
Wrong.
It doesn't make much sense at all. And it's actually very likely, I actually argue the case, that his sword skills, Zoro's swordsmanship, matters more than his levels of haki. And now we need to get some charts out. Let's try and keep things simple here and use a nice pie chart, because we can break down Zoro's overall stats into 3 neat categories, where you have his base power, you have his techniques and skills, and then you have his ability. For him, abilities will, let's say, be haki in general, so observation, conquerors, armor haki, and let's say if Ashura is something else aside from haki, things of that sort. His base power, let's say, be his physical strength, his stamina, his speed, his endurance, etc. And his techniques and skills, let's say, be his swordsmanship, and on occasion, his hand-to-hand fighting. I would argue that Zoro's techniques and skills slice is larger than his ability slice, since Zoro will never be able to be at his best without his best techniques. So saith the man himself, "Oh Ryoma, I wish I could show you my three-sword style." Even during Wano Country, his skills were improving at an astonishing rate, where of course people remember Zoro getting Conqueror's Haki Awakening during the arc. Naturally, that's the most prominent thing, duh. But he also learned the Firefox style. The dude learned the Firefox style off screen. Of course, Oda pulling out one of his most infamous abilities, the off-screen no me, lovely. and in chapter 1027, he learned the Clear Lance two-sword style move on the fly, which makes him move in air via shockwaves like Sanji Skywalk. That is a huge mobility buff for Zoro, because mobility has been one of Zoro's weaker points. For example, he needed Orlumbus to throw him to Pika's location. He needed Usopp to set up the Trampolia and cut the dragon's head off in Punk Hazard. Both the Clear Lance, boom, shockwave mobility, this is a good buff for Zoro without a damn doubt. And even when he was using Conqueror's Haki Infusion against King the Wildfire, was one of the first things we see him do. Use his added Haki power to make a long-range version of his Purgatory Onigiri skill, and attacking King the Wildfire in like a Bleach Quincy Star pattern in chapter 1035. But that, of course, is not just Haki, it's also raw physical power. Just how Garp needs immense physical strength to punch the air and make a shockwave, and then combine that shockwave with his Conqueror's Haki, Zoro needs great physical strength to make his close range attack transform it into a long range attack and make a threefold cross star. So not only are Zoro's sword skills top tier, but his physical body is studly. So when it comes to his base power, that slice is likely just as big as the ability slice, or even bigger than the ability slice. The reason being is because he's been training his base power, his physical abilities, for a much longer period of time than he has with his abilities and Haki overall. Keep in mind that in Dressrosa, Armor Haki coating was a big deal for him. And you could argue in some sense that his own physical body has to be able to handle his own output of Haki, since his Haki does come from his body. So who's to really say that's actually the case or not? But over the course of time, what is for sure is that his overall pie is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and he's going to improve and improve. Maybe his ability slice will get bigger than his base power slice. Maybe they'll start to even out and be the same. But I think universally, his technique and skill slice will be the biggest slice of his pie. I think it's always going to apply even when he beats Mihawk. Speaking of which, let's get over to the Mihawk pie. The pizzeria is still open. And what we know by default, is that Mihawk, as the world's strongest swordsman, has the greatest sword play, the greatest sword skill in the world. That is what it means to be the world's greatest, the world's strongest swordsman. So compared to other people that rely heavily on their swordsmanship skills and techniques, people like Zoro, people like, let's say, Cavendish, like Ashura Doji or Denjiro and so on, those people whose techniques and skill slice is mostly made up of swordsmanship, Mihawk, it is Mihawk who has the largest slice. And within his own pie, like with Zoro, I would argue that his techniques and skills are the largest, that is the largest slice compared to his abilities and compared to his base power. Does Mihawk have powerful abilities? Of course he does. Why? Because he has powerful Haki, duh, without a doubt. So that slice is going to be large just in general. The same thing for his base power, because his physical body is probably studly as all hell. But nonetheless, techniques and skills reign supreme. And part of the reason I can do this is that if I want to, I can actually fairly superimpose the feats of S-Hawk, the clone of Mihawk, who again, as of yet, has no confirmed Haki, onto the original, onto Mihawk himself. I do not doubt for a second that the things that S-Hawk can do, so can Mihawk, particularly in terms of swordsmanship. Yes, obviously, the Lunarian body physique, that does come into play. Mihawk does not have that. But if Mihawk needs to, let's say, use Haki to to supplement for added power, then everything S-Hawk can do outside of the Spa Dove Fruit ability and of course his Lunarian traits is fair game for Mihawk. But when you add the S-Hawk bit in there, that is again a testament to Mihawk's techniques and skills and base power, not his hockey. And speaking of Lunarians, someone like King the Wildfire probably has a large technique and skill slice too, but only a small fraction of that slice. Only a few anchovies, delicious. If you don't get me started, but only a few anchovies on the pizza are dedicated to swordsmanship. It's a very, very, very small fraction of that technique and skill slice. He does enjoy a good duel, but admittedly, he does not care about swordsmanship. Like what Zoro said, he never said that he was a swordsman after all. And that's how it all makes sense. King can wield his sword as his main weapon, but not be a swordsman per se. In chapter 50, when Mihawk says, without subtlety, a sword is but an iron bar, King the Wildfire, when it comes to his sword, he's using an iron bar. A trick sword weapon that he uses to disarm certain opponents and get the advantage on them. No sword techniques or skills, nothing. Swords play be damned. His pie leans heavily towards abilities and base power. And I would surmise that something similar is happening with red-haired Shanks. 12 years ago, when Shanks had his left arm, I think that he was very similar to Mihawk and Zoro. His pie chart would have had techniques and skills be the largest slice among the other slices. He was likely left-handed based on what we see in the flashbacks with him holding his sword with that hand, or at the very least, let's say ambidextrous. We know that him and Mihawk had these well-known daily duels, and that his bounty at that point in time was 1,040,000,000. Very similar to Katakuri. But when he lost his arm when he saved Luffy, a shocking event that even Whitebeard claims caught him by surprise, I think at that moment, Shanks' techniques and skills, that slice shrunk demonstrably. And I think at that point in time, Mihawk was a superior fighter. Just horrifically imagine for a second that Zoro gets the 2009 X-Men movie Deadpool treatment, where his mouth is sewn shut. Yeah, it's nasty. Yeah, it's freaky. It's terrifying. But the main thing here for this video is that he cannot use Santoryu. And if Zoro cannot use Santoryu, that is a huge decrease in his combat ability. And so in that sense, this is what happened to Shanks. However, we find out in the ultimate chapter 957 that Shanks became an emperor 6 years ago from the present in the story, which means it was 6 years ago from the time he left Luffy in Fuchsia Village that he became an emperor of the sea in the new world. And he did this despite losing his dominant arm and on paper having the weakest fleet out of any Yonko. And since 12 years ago, his bounty has damn near quadrupled, clearly evidence that he has gotten much more powerful from then. But how? The answer? Hockey. If his technique and skill slice dramatically shrinks because he loses his predominant arm, but somehow over those 12 years, his overall pie, after getting smaller for a bit, got larger and larger and larger and larger and larger to where he is an emperor of the sea, the only way that can happen is if his base power and abilities make up for that. And right now, Shanks has the THE with the hyphen over it, the greatest hockey feats in the series by far. No one in the series comes even close to what Shanks has performed in both the observation and Conqueror's hockey departments. And to be clear, it's not like his techniques and skills are non-existent. They are there, and likely his sword skills are a nice chunk of his techniques and skills, but in theory, that slice overall is smaller than the ability slice and his base power slice. And there's a good chance that his ability slice is his largest slice, let's say 50% and up. And now all that's left is just gauging between Shanks and Mihawk which one of their pies is the biggest pie overall. And even though we know that Mihawk has better sword play, which I already broke down in a previous section of this video, Shanks' feats and his portrayal, they do outweigh Mihawk's. Though I'll say right now, Mihawk is the one that has displayed better swordsmanship feats than Shanks has. In fact, I would say that definitely. At Marineford, Mihawk had an excellent showcase of his sword skills on display. Literally perceived as sniped Luffy through seas of thousands of men and tagged Luffy with a cut. Yeah, bro. Mihawk has displayed phenomenal sword skills during Marineford, and we're giving him credit to what S-Hawk did to the main mountain of Amazon Lily. In fact, from the very beginning, when Mihawk diverted the bullets oncoming his way when he was at Baratier, when has Shanks done anything like that? When? I don't know. You tell me. I don't think Shanks has ever done anything like that with Griffin that we've ever seen so far. Though, just in case, because some folks may get this confused, don't confuse feats and portrayal. Shanks, on paper, has the potential to do a lot of these things, but Mihawk has actually shown through his swordplay and his finesse, he's actually shown that he can do these things. And during the 12 years after Shanks lost his arm, I don't doubt for a second that Mihawk also got stronger. But the question is, how much stronger? At what rate did his skills improve? Mihawk's character, I think, is pretty interesting when it comes to his motives, his lack of emotion, and his history with Shanks. And I think I'm gonna do videos, or at least a video, diving deeper into Mihawk's character. But even still, I would argue that Shanks had a steeper growth rate than Mihawk, likely since the last time they fought 12 years ago, considering where Shanks could have been power-wise when he lost his arm and where he is now. Where is he now? Well, Shanks right now is at the point where he can baby shake. Straight up baby shake 2 people worth 3 billion berries a pop. And one of these incidences, he caught another supernova like fries on the side for free. His feats are actually bonkers, unironically bonkers. And in terms of the portrayal, he has the Kaido gas. In the pre-time skip, when they had an altercation before Shanks arrived to Marineford, he split the sky with Whitebeard, and he is among the scant few men that Kaido himself acknowledges. He stopped the war at Marineford while Blackbeard was on a power high and Mihawk himself left when Shanks arrived. All of these crazy things in terms of feats and portrayal, all while being known for having the weakest Yonko Armada. And on the flip side, the strongest thing going for Mihawk's portrayal is his relationship to Shanks, where again, he has greater sword skill, greater sword play than Shanks. But keep in mind that Shanks and him haven't had anything going for their rivalry in the past 12 years, at least as far as we know. Even though Mihawk does have better sword feats compared to Shanks, I'd argue at this point in time, Shanks has better overall feats compared to Mihawk. And another thing on Shanks' favor for portrayal is the bounty, where Shanks has a higher bounty than Mihawk. And it's really hard to say, well, because he's an emperor, therefore he gets automatic higher bounty, because it didn't apply to Buggy or Luffy, where Luffy got the same bounty as Kid and Law, even though he's an emperor, and Buggy has a lower bounty than Mihawk, even though he's an emperor. Matter of fact, even Blackbeard's bounty at the beginning of the post-time skip was only in the 2 billion, closer to Crocodile's bounty currently. And once again, folks, we want to bring up the idea of, well, Mihawk has a black blade and Shanks does not, but we don't know how we get a black blade. And in the Road to Laugh Tale, it is strongly hinted at that it is outside the paradigm of hockey. Therefore, it cannot be used to theoretically bolster Mihawk's hockey level above anyone that does not have a black blade. That includes Shanks. So outside of sword play and swordsmanship, the feats and the portrayal weigh heavily in Shanks' favor than Mihawk's favor. This is why I call Shanks the red hair wonder. And I think that right now in the series, he has the biggest pie. The biggest pie chart in terms of size and scale. This man is swimming in his pizza like he's Scrooge McDuck swimming through gold. The evidence at this point in time is just too strong in Shanks' favor.
鷹の目どこへ行く 白ひげと戦うことは承諾したが、赤髪は協定の範囲外だ。
So, in conclusion, long video, let's keep this brief. I could be wrong. Obviously, I'm just one man with one take on the series. But I really did do my utmost to try and break this down in a simplistic way that I thought made the most sense in my view of the story, okay? I really wanted to cross my T's, dot my I's, and be as thorough as I possibly could without making the video like 2 hours long. I think moving forward, unless I need to, I'm gonna just probably step back from this because I am comfortable in terms of the Mihawk and Shanks situation. I'm very comfortable right now. I think I did a pretty good job focusing on like the sword skill, what that really means, so people have a better idea of what I'm talking about. Because I recall in the previous edition of this video, Subject, I did 3+ years ago, folks were really confused with the whole like ladder thing, like pure, true, regular, non. So I just really wanted to focus it more so on sword skill. Why someone like King the Wildfire isn't necessarily a swordsman because his skill percentage is so low. What sword skill can mean in conjunction with other abilities like martial arts, like marksmanship, like devil fruits and hockey and so on and so forth. And then hopefully these pie charts helped you guys out because I really want to have simple ways of visually describing what makes up a character's combat skills. Like what you would see in JoJo's, where in the eye catchers, they kind of give you the stand name and then they give you what stats that stand is good at, something of that sort. I need to thank, of course, I have to thank Jafar from afar for doing all this
Help me!
for doing all this work. I know it's hard for him to do this, obviously, particularly when I think he has a certain agenda himself, and this goes against that agenda.
I am not.
But the job is the job. That's A. B is that if you do enjoy my content at large, whether you disagree or agree with me, you can dislike or like this video. Subscribe to my channel, and of course, click on that bell to join the notification squad. So, on that note, everyone, take care, stay safe. Don't let the toxicity just overcome you and overwhelm you. Try and find your happy place and go to it mentally, maybe even physically if you have to. At the end of the damn day, we are all here to do what? Talk about a series that we wholesomely, for the most part, wholesomely enjoy. One Piece. So on that note, I'm gonna catch you cats on the flip side.
See you.